Hey everyone, it's Julie. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's video is going to be an update log, and included in that log will be my follow-up to the 10 decks for Lent challenge. So I figure I would use this time to feed two birds with one scone. So you might want to grab a drink or a snacky snack because this one will be a longer one. Starting off with a few non-tarot related things. In March, Matt and I went to the movie theater to see a streamed viewing of BTS Permission to Dance in Seoul, Korea. I voluntold Matt that he was going, but to his credit, he was really good-natured about it. He actually ended up enjoying it. For it being 3 hours long, he said it didn't feel nearly as long as the Batman movie. So, and he has come to appreciate BTS and their talent. So I knew I married the right guy, and it was fun being with fellow ARMY. You know, they were cheering and clapping along and holding up their army bombs and just having a great time. And it's funny because the particular movie theater we went to, called the Alamo Draft House, they have a no talking policy, a very strict one actually, where you can anonymously report people for being too disruptive, and they will seriously boot your ass out. But there was no way that fellow ARMY was going to tell on each other, and given the nature of what we were watching, it was great, and we all had a fantastic time. Nobody got kicked out. We were pretty well behaved. I also binge watched the second season of Bridgerton. I've been hearing some mixed things, mixed reviews and reactions to the second season. A lot of people saying they preferred the first season. A lot of people saying that, oh my gosh, it deviated too much from the book. I have read the book, the second book. And yes, it does deviate, but that is the nature of movies and TV. Like and I didn't mind. I thought they did it reasonably well. I thought it was, well executed. Its second season was not as spicy, if you know what I mean, as season one. And yet I enjoyed it way more than season one. So, I enjoyed both of them. I definitely enjoyed season two more, and am very much looking forward to season 3 and season 4, which I think they are confirmed to be producing. And finally, I watched a documentary of Evan Rachel Wood called Phoenix Rising, and it pretty much details how Marilyn Manson, or Brian Warner, aka Marilyn Manson, how he emotionally and physically abused her during their relationship, how he had groomed her in the very, very beginning. And so it was difficult to watch, and yet I felt it was important to watch. It was important to hear her story. So it's not easy. It's not an easy documentary. And now on to decks, which will predominantly be an update to the 10 Decks for Lent challenge, which ran from, the beginning of Lent, obvi. What were the dates though? March 2nd to April 14th. So I believe, and this was a challenge started by Sylvain over at Sylvain's Deadly Sins. And I think he's going all the way until Easter. However, I stopped when Lent ended. So essentially the whole premise of this challenge is what you would guess from the title. You were to pick only 10 decks and use only those 10 during Lent, hence kind of giving up or sacrificing the other decks for the time being. And overall, I will say that this didn't feel all that challenging, honestly. And you know, not to brag or anything, but I think I am the type of person who can work with a deck for, say, like a month. You know, that is what I used to do. Just a few years ago when I was getting back into tarot, I would spend a whole month with just like 1 or 2 decks, really getting to know that deck. So for me, 10 decks was a great amount. And I am glad that this challenge is over because I do miss my other decks. So when I filmed the original VR, I had shown only maybe like 5 decks because I didn't have the other ones, or I wasn't sure exactly which remaining decks I would fill the open spots with. But I have everything now, and I would say I was overall successful. There was maybe like one time when I inadvertently kind of broke the guidelines, and that was when I went to pull from the She of Insight Oracle by Renee from Meadowlark Mystic. You can find the deck on MPC, and you can find the guidebook on Amazon. But so I had, in the month of, I want to say February or March, I had been working with Amla, She of the Empty Vessel. I'd been really sitting with her because I was going through essentially a release. And I speak about this in my Reset 2022 update of releasing a very huge project that had been near and dear to my heart. And this was the feminine guide that really stayed with me, bringing this back around. I broke my Lent guideline because I was like, oh, I need to pull, you know, I think it's time that I call on a new voice. And so I did a random pull, and this was not one of my 10 decks. And the card is Astrid, and I have her on my board right there as a reminder. But I pulled Astrid, and she is She of the Magical Path. And it's such an amazing message to receive from her, because it's all about, you know, calling on us to remember our magical path and to step onto it with purpose. It says, you know, some of the questions are, how can I see the magic in my world? Who can aid me in rekindling my magical outlook? And it's all about intention and outlook, and re-envisioning it. And so that is how I broke my guideline, and I don't care. You know, this is meant to be fun, but full kind of transparency. It's just like one time. So I still feel like this challenge was a success for me. Like, I didn't even realize I had done that until until after I'd done it. So why don't we get on to the decks that I actually had chosen for Lent? And some of these you might have already seen during my original VR to this challenge. So I'm not gonna go into too much depth with several of these. So first one is the Darkwood Tarot, surprise, surprise. A great deck to work with. I know a lot of people like to pull this out during the darker times of the season. But for me, I can use this at any point in time. It's just a great all-rounder for me. I love the artwork. I love just the fantasy vibe and world building of this deck. I think Abigail Larson does a fantastic job with these images, and Sasha Graham wrote a fantastic guidebook. So that was deck number 1. Let's see, what other one? Oh, yes. Okay, so second deck, my Everyday Witch. Another one that isn't too much of a surprise. But, you know, whenever I come back to this deck, I just feel so freaking happy. And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of just kind of losing a little bit of sight of the tried and true decks that are in your collection, because you're working with other decks, and which is great. But then when you come back to your favorites, it's like, it just feels like coming home, you know? Next up is the Luna Soul Tarot, and this is the first edition. Once again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. I felt like this was a great deck for spring because of the beautiful soft colors, and also I knew this was a deck that I wanted to bring up in our most recent Three Girls Live, because the focus was spring-themed decks. So if you want to know how I feel about this deck, please do check out that live. Next up, the Marigold Tarot. Now this one is a new deck to me this year. It was a gift, and therefore my using it does not break my Reset 2022 guidelines. And I will say this deck, I used it for maybe a week and a half and really enjoyed it. And at the same time felt like the voice of this deck was a little slower to come to me. I used this for daily pulls. I don't think I used it for any spreads, but aside from it, I think I did a quick interview spread with this one, I think. I will want to spend more time with this deck, but in general, it feels kind of neutral as of now. And then the final deck of, I believe, the 5 that I showed in the original video, original VR, is my Strangeling Tarot, which, by the way, I thank everyone for their compliments and their kind words and support of this deck. It really means a lot. I just am so in love with this deck, honestly. I mean, this is what I wanted of a Jasmine Beckett Griffith deck. And so to be able to create one just gives me so much joy. And so I have been using this one a lot. I've been coming back to this one. So I did use the JBG in a tarot spread, which I mark here in my journal. And I used it with the Know, Grow, and Let Go spread. And this spread is not mine. I believe it is by Emerald Lotus Goddess Divination or something to that effect. I apologize, but I did get it off of, I think, Instagram. And so it was on the money for sure. And it's a 3-card spread, and then I followed it up with an Oracle card pull from the 6th deck that was part of my 10 decks for Lent. And this is one that I haven't showed yet because I didn't have it at the time. I was waiting on it to be delivered, and that is my homemade JBG Oracle. I've just been calling it the Strangeling Oracle, but this, I just did it for fun. This is not on MPC because I just figure there are so many JBG Oracle decks out there. So there is no dearth of JBG Oracles, but I did want something that, once again, resonated with me, that spoke directly to me and had the art that I liked and the, okay, this one's going to be a little creepy, so just, and the keywords that I particularly wanted. And so I did pull one card from that, and I got, what was the card that I got? I got Betrayal. So, Medusa, again. And actually, speaking of Medusa, do you see that right back there? She's new, she's badass, I love her. She's hanging out with Baby Yoda, and they're cool with each other. Baby Yoda is not a human male, so it's fine. He's charmed her, they're buddies. Yeah, so I've really been enjoying this as well, and I paired it with my, of course, Notorious JBG, and then also paired it with Marigold. I mean, I was just like pairing it with everything that I was using. 7th deck during Lent was the Tarot Sirene. I finished writing my keywords on this deck and really like how they turned out. And I believe I discussed this on my Reset 2022 update as well. So this has been, yeah, a bonding experience to work like this with this deck. And I also did use this deck in a spread, and I think I used it for Ostara. So I used it on the Ostara Serpent Magic spread, and I kind of tweaked it to suit me. But this spread is from the 365 tarot spreads from Sasha Graham. And it was great. It was a great and seamless read. Very clear messages. And it was a great way to kick off the spring season. 8th deck that I wasn't able to show in my earlier video because I didn't have it yet, but anticipated that it was on its way, is the Dream Vision Tarot. Also a very, very kind gift. Okay, so this had been on my anti-haul because, I mean, if you just look at this deck, it is so chunky. And I just knew, I was like, there is no way I'm going to be able to shuffle this deck, which I can't. I really can't. I mean, I can do it when I split it up into smaller batches. But even then, because of this card stock, which is like, I don't know, it's thick, but I wouldn't say it's like the most flexible. And so not having this deck for very long, I already creased one of the cards, which low-key annoyed me, but I'm over it. It's fine. It's a beautiful deck. I think a lot of people have mentioned in their first impressions that it's very reminiscent of Mystic Mondays, but more captivating and engaging, which I have to personally agree with, that Mystic Mondays, while a great deck, did not work for me in the end, and I rehomed it. But this, just overall, beautiful. Not a fan of the holographic edges. I'm probably in the minority, but usually, like, it's aesthetically beautiful, but in terms of shuffling, it hurts my hands. So this is gentler in voice than I had anticipated that it would be. I don't know. I thought that because of maybe the bright colors and the very extraterrestrial looking figures, that this was going to be a little more bold in its messages, kind of be more like in my face. But actually, it is very gentle with me. And I would call it a comfort deck for me. I would call it like a hug deck. So I really enjoyed my time with this. I will say, I don't know if I've shown it yet, but speaking of Empress cards, pregnant Empress cards, I can talk today. One of my favorite Empress cards ever. And I have bitched about kind of getting over the pregnant Empress, but actually this one is beautiful. I love it so much. And I did end up just recently doing a spread with the Dream Vision, and this spread comes from Amy over at Strength Reversed. It's called A Tarot Spread for When You Fall on Your Ass. And so good. This spread is so good. I will leave a link to Amy's video so that you can get the prompts and the genesis of how this spread came about. Very illuminating, you know, and in a way that's like you deep down know these things about yourself, and you just need, yes, you need a little bit of a kick in the ass when you fall on your ass to get back up. And so the Dream Vision Tarot was great because it, again, was that gentle voice that still gave me that nudge to remind me, okay, you have fallen once again into this all or nothing mindset. You are just getting in your own way and you need to stop. And, you know, here's a way that you can move forward. And here's a new way that you can see this particular problem as maybe not being a problem. And you know, how does this particular situation connect with the larger patterns of behavior that you're prone to kind of falling into? It's just, it was a great spread. So thank you, Amy, for that. Next deck in my 10 decks for Lent, the Moon Void Tarot. And this is the 3rd edition. I did modify this deck by coloring on it because that's what I do with Moon Void, to make it my own. And so I have added some splashes of this more like fuchsia color to most, if not all, of the images, and I really like the result. So if you've been on my channel with me for any amount of time, you know that the older edition of Moon Void is one that is very special to me. And so this one I had not worked with as much, of course, as the 2nd edition. So I wanted to give this edition a little bit of time and attention, and because I had kind of gone back and forth about whether I really in the end needed this edition because I was so bonded to the older edition. But this one is a keeper too. The final deck in my 10 decks, Tarot of the Sweet Twilight, which is the deck that I am working with this week. I did modify this deck I chopped off the top and bottom borders because they were crammed with the multilingual titles. And I will say, you know, this deck is just very interesting because when I started working with it, I wasn't necessarily like excited. I just, this was just on my list of the 10 decks, and not that I was obligated to work with all 10, but I thought, yeah, you know, it feels like spring to me, more like a spring summer type deck. And so I wanted to give it some attention as well, being one that I hadn't worked with very much previously. And it really is one of those decks where it's like you don't necessarily feel a lot of excitement when you first pick it up to use it, but then, you know, when you pull the card, when you look at the image, it really is fun and captivating and quirky, and reminds me of the reasons why I was interested in this deck to begin with. It's a different flavor from what we see of the usual RWS, and that's why I like this deck. I do think that you need to be in a certain mood for this kind of deck, though. Maybe in more of a, I will say more of a reflective mood. Or maybe if there's something that you're trying to work out, this might be a deck that would be great for that, or at least that's my feeling. I think this week I'm maybe not in the best of headspaces, though, to really get the full range of, you know, how this deck can work for me. That being said, I still have been enjoying my daily draws. I believe I've covered everything, so thank you very much if you've stayed with me for this long. I do plan on doing another week of 5 days, 5 VRs. The last time, well, the only time that I had done that, people seem to enjoy it. And so given that I am once again backlogged with VRs that I've been meaning to do, I will probably try to knock those out in a week. I'm not sure which week yet, hopefully sometime in May. So once again, thank you for taking the time to hang out with me. If you have made it this far, please drop me a comment letting me know what kinds of videos that you would like to see from me on this channel. It's not to say that I will indeed make these suggested videos, but I all the same will take them into consideration and would like to hear your thoughts. So until the next time, much love and take care.